Welcome to Concept. I'm Dr. Bill Loveless. Thank you for watching. We're talking today about marriage. That's the subject. The title is, and I love this title, Marriage, a Noble Daring. How do you like that? A noble daring. I have no idea where that came from, except that a 16th century cleric invented that title to go with marriage. And I gave my wife 3 titles for this program today. So which one of these do you like the best, sweetie? And she picked out Marriage, a Noble Daring. Well, you know, it sure was. Yeah, I didn't have the foggiest idea who I was. I didn't have the foggiest idea who she was. I didn't know what I was doing when I walked down the aisle. And most brides and grooms don't know what they're doing when they walk down the aisle. And I'm saying today, up with marriage, up with weddings. I love to go to weddings. I love to watch weddings. I mean, they're so beautiful and so real and so surreal and so unreal, all wrapped up together. A noble daring is the best way I can think of. So you decided to get married. A noble daring. And so you decided to get married. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what makes it work, what makes it not work. And you know, I'm in favor of marriage. I like to go to weddings. I love to perform marriages. I've performed well over 1,000 weddings in my day. Some days 2 or 3 on the same day. For years and years, and my experience has taught me a few things, which here on Concept I'm going to share with you. This is kind of fun for me, and I hope you enjoy the program today, because if you've decided to get married, tune in. I think this will be helpful to you. If you've gotten married and got burned, stay with us. This will be helpful to you too. If you haven't decided to get married at all, stay tuned. This will be helpful for you too. What we have today is kind of a mixed bag of truisms that we can count on when it comes to marriage and all that goes with it. So we're going to kind of have some fun. We're going to look at a major experiment, actually a research study, on 351 married couples who have been married 15 years or more. So that's a pretty good record. We'll talk about that record and what that means later on in the program today. But I think you're going to enjoy this as we move along in terms of you're handling over your life, your whole self. You're handing yourself over. And your body, your soul, your happiness, your future, to somebody you loved and love, but who was and remained and remains a stranger. How do you like that? Your body, your soul, your happiness, your future, to somebody you love or loved when you got married, who remains a total stranger. In fact, you're a total stranger to yourself, probably. I certainly was. I had no idea who I was when I got married, and I had no idea who my wife was when I got married to her, and she could say the same for me. This is the case. But in spite of all of this, I'm saying today, up with marriage, up with weddings. Let's move along into this noble experiment of marriage. Marriage is an act of faith. If you want to translate that word faith, you can translate it into the word trust. Because the Greek word for faith is pistis, and it's the same thing for trust. So I have faith in somebody, it means I trust them. And probably one of the most important things to find in a marriage relationship is trust. That's a biggie. So marriage is an act of trust. You don't trust your partner yet because you don't know him well enough, and you don't know yourself well enough, but it is an act of faith. If you refuse to count the cost, your courage and trust can unlock new doors for you and your lover. If you refuse to count the cost, how much is this going to cost me? How much is this going to hurt? How much this and how much that? If you simply don't do that, and your courage and your trust, I have faith. I trust this woman. I trust this man. I don't know him. I don't know me. But I am going to not count the cost. I'm not going to have these reservations any longer. I'm going to move ahead. My courage and my trust can unlock new doors for you and for your lover. And that's what I really want to talk about today. You have the power in your hands to develop compassion, endurance, generosity, joy, passion, fidelity, and hope. Now, you know, that's quite a list. If you look at that list carefully, compassion. Boy, if there ever was something husbands and wives need, it's compassion for each other. And compassion for the kids that come along usually, and compassion for the families, and compassion for the neighbors. Compassion is one of those wonderful things that you have the power to unlock in each other in a marriage. Endurance is another one. And generosity, and joy, and passion, and fidelity, and hope. Look at that list a minute. Just look at it. These are all big deals. These are all major league hitters in the relationship situation. How is it possible to begin to do this? Well, the most important things, the most difficult things, are usually the simplest things. So let me just talk to you a few minutes, and please listen to me. Listen to an old hand, an old experienced hand, at how you really develop compassion, endurance, generosity, joy, passion, fidelity, and hope in marriage. How do you do that? Well, there's a lot of ways, and we're going to talk about that today. That's the subject of this whole program. Number one, you do it with gestures. In the morning, during the day, and in the evening, give your spouse a gesture. What do I mean by a gesture? I mean a look or a word. A look or a word. Just a gesture. A kind look. A kind first thing when you get up, last thing when you go to bed, and in between too. Every day. How do you develop these things? Gestures. You do it by gestures. You do it by hugs. I'm talking about a 6-second hug. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That long. 6 times a day. A 6-second hug. 6 times a day. And also with the gestures and with the hugs come thoughts. Plan during the course of the day to have a positive thought about your husband or your wife several times a day. 3, 4, 5 times a day. Make it a ritual. Make it a habit. Habits never go away. They do hibernate, but they never go away. So I'm talking about rituals simple little rituals which translate into habits, which translate into power to unlock in somebody else compassion, endurance, generosity, joy, passion, fidelity, and hope. This marvelous list, which you have the power to unlock in somebody else, is generated by these simple little rituals that I just have described to you in detail. Is the white bridal gown a Victorian symbol of prudery? A very good question. Now, I've already told you that I like to go to weddings. I like to watch what the bridal party is wearing. I love the gowns that the women wear and that the bride wears. And I love the suits, the tuxedos and the suits and the various get-ups that the grooms and the groomsmen wear. I love to watch the whole thing. But the white gown and the veil of Christian weddings has nothing to do with Victorian prudery. Nothing at all. The predecessor is the baptismal robe, signifying dedication to a totally new way of life. So when you go to a wedding, don't think of Queen Victoria. When you see that white veil over the bride's face, remember that that veil is the forerunner of that veil was, guess what? A white baptismal robe, which signified a totally new way of life. That's where that came from. The veil is a symbol of consecration. Look for a minute. Jewish couples, even today, Jewish couples still stand under the veil to accept this symbolism. The white robe of baptism, you are being set aside for a new way of life. The veil, a symbol of consecration, originally worn by both men and women. That's where it came from. That's why it's so important. That's why I like to go to weddings. That's why I like to see what happens when people get married at the very beginning. Because it all has so much meaning. And in spite of all the things that are happening in our world, it still says an awful lot. Now, you know in America, and I know in America, that the divorce rate is right at 50%. The divorce rate for second marriages is right at 62%. That's 12% more than half. So most marriage counselors, or many marriage counselors at least today, there are a few that don't do this, including me, spend their time looking at what went wrong. How can we fix what's broken here? What went wrong in marriage? How can we do something about this? And this is a situation that I think needs to be changed. And so I thought in this program today, instead of looking at all the problems of why marriages go wrong, because there are plenty of problems, and I know of many broken marriages myself. I work with these every week, so I know all about this. I don't have to be reminded of the tragedy, and I don't have to be reminded of the misery, the uncomfortableness, and the sheer breakdown of many relationships. But there's another side. And it's this other side that I want to look at with you now. So we're now going to look, well, what happens to this cohort of marriages that work? Why should we focus all our time on the 50% that don't work? Why not focus our attention on the 50% that work and ask ourselves, Well, what's making them work? What do these people bring? What do these people find? What do these people create in this relationship we call marriage? So what keeps American couples together? Well, that's what we're going to look at now, and we're going to look at a study done on 351 couples married 15 years or more. The top reasons enduring couples give for keeping a marriage going. What do they say themselves? What is it that's happening between us? What is it that we created together that makes this situation work for us? That's what we want to find out. So let's take a look at the very first reason. Now, during this report, we're going to look at the male responses and the female responses. There were 30 items in the survey instrument, and it was interesting. We got almost down to 10 before the men and the women split. This was not arranged. This was done with neither female or male knowing what the other one was saying in the survey. So it's very interesting. Now, we talked about 15 years. There are two times that we know in the research where marriages are under strain. Early on the marriage, early in the first 2 to 4 years. A lot of divorces take place in that time. And then later on, after a marriage is 20, 25 years old, kids are gone, is this all there is? I need a new life, and blah, 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 and so on. And so this is, these are the two times. Now, this study was done on people that have survived the first period, and many of them well into having been married more than 25 years. And so it's interesting that the men and the women in this study actually kind of agreed on what they had to say. So here are the top reasons in a study of 351 couples that made their marriages work. They came into the marriage and they said, in the marriage, my spouse is my best friend. In some very real way, I discovered someone that I was safe with, and someone who felt safe with me. We did the things that I mentioned to you, the gestures, the hugs, the thoughts, simple stuff. This is simple stuff, folks. But it makes marriage, when you develop these little habits, these little rituals, these rituals of looking and touching, of hugging and thinking, you become best friends. Number two, men and women agreed. I like my spouse as a person. I like my spouse as a person. What does that mean? Did you lose your personality when you got married? Does it mean you kind of got enveloped in this big thing called marriage and you lost a sense of self? Not at all. What it means is that in the happy marriages, the 50% that are happy, rather they found themselves. They found each other as best friends. They were a friend, and their partner was a friend. They developed the friending skills together. I like my spouse as a person. Yeah, I found out who I was, and they found out who they were. And as we found ourselves in this relationship, we gave ourselves to each other, but we also found ourselves. Number three, they went into this with the idea that marriage was a long-term commitment. They took very seriously, the males and the females in this study of successful marriages, that marriage was a long-term commitment. No backing away, no crossed fingers, if this doesn't work, we can always get out of it. They went in with a complete idea that this was a long-term, permanent commitment. They took seriously the phrase from the Book of Common Prayer in the Church of England, "Till death do us part." They took that very seriously. Number 4, marriage is sacred. Marriage is sacred. It's a long-term commitment. It's a long-term commitment. It's sacred. Remember what I told you? The white bridal ground's forerunner was the white baptismal robe. We're setting this person apart, this candidate for baptism, for a different way of life. We're setting aside this bride and this groom for a different way of life. It's a sacred way of life. It's a sacrament, if you please. This is what it's all about. We agree, number 5, on aims and goals. And we don't live separate lives. I don't go one way and my wife goes another. We agree on aims and goals. This is very, very important for us. My spouse has grown more interesting, number 6. My spouse has grown more interesting. As time has gone by, I have learned more about myself, but I've learned more about her or more about him. And my spouse actually has become very interesting to me. And I have been having so much fun finding out the interests of my wife. I've learned a little bit about her family or his family, and my spouse has grown more interesting. Number 7, this is what married couples who have been successful have discovered. I want the relationship to succeed. No matter what happens, I want it to succeed. Number 8, an enduring marriage is important to social stability. Let's take a look at those two together. I want my relationship to succeed. I am planning on this not being a failure. I'm planning on this to succeed. Trust me, it's far better to talk about marriage and your views of marriage before you get married than afterwards, and that's why I'm a firm believer in pre-marriage counseling. It shouldn't go on and on and on, but it should be with somebody who's competent to know what they're doing to help you explore the ideas that you got into when you said yes, and to believe in an enduring marriage as an important part of social stability. Number 9, we laugh together. We laugh together. You know, if you're gesturing, if you're touching and looking, you'll be able to laugh. We laugh together. I am proud of my spouse's achievements. We agree about our sex life. How important is sex life? Is it important? Yes and no. Long married couples say if it's not there, it's important. We need to fix that. It needs to be there. Is it the most important thing in our relationship? Absolutely not. Not at all. I am proud of my spouse's achievements. We agree on our sex life. We talk about our sex life. The frequency of intercourse, the frequency of making love, of touching each other and playing with each other and caressing each other is something we very much agree on. Number 12, we agree on how often to show affection. And this goes into that daily hug. Remember I said 6-second hugs 6 times a day. Most of you aren't doing that. I'm not either. I'm going to try that, though. I've been starting to try that, and it sure does feel good, and it's a wonderful way to go. We agree on a philosophy of life. What is the philosophy of life? What is life all about? Why are we here? What is the purpose of us? The men add, I confide in my spouse. It's interesting that females didn't add that in the study. In this study of 351 couples, the men are the one that said, I confide in my spouse. The women said, we discuss things calmly. That was a very interesting thing to hear, I thought. We discuss things calmly. That wasn't in the same list as men. Women very much appreciated in the study the ability to talk over things calmly, without yelling, without arguing, without somebody having to prove a point and make their point. Big deal. I got to prove I'm right here, and I've got to prove you're wrong. In the happily married couples, calm discussion was the rule. Marriage is a noble daring. So you decided to get married. Good decision. If you decided for the right reasons, till death do us part, need not be a problem. Till death do us part is not a binding clause. It is a gratifying reality. The focus is not on death. The focus is on living together. The phrase, till death do us part, doesn't anticipate death. In the wedding service, till death do us part is not a binding clause. It is a gratifying reality. This is the way couples who have been successful move into from weddings to early marriage to middle marriage and to late marriage in ways that are very gratifying. Everybody feels safe. Everybody feels separate and yet together. Everybody feels known and yet private. Everybody stays known and separate and private at the same time. Till death do us part is a promise we made. And at every stage, it becomes a gratifying reality. I hope that if you haven't gotten married yet and you're planning to, you'll move ahead. If you have, maybe something we've said today has been helpful to you, because all of us need all the help we can get. And don't forget, don't try to be perfect. There's no possibility of anybody watching me or me ever being perfect. But what I am asking you to do is do try to do better.